Welcome to Special News YouTube channel. The glorious Ukrainian army continues its legendary victories over the Russian army. The struggle of the Ukrainian army against the Russian invaders is full of great victories that will go down in history. The Ukrainians showed an unprecedented example of resistance when the Russian army invaded their country in February. The Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army as a whole put up a wall against the attacks of the Russian army. The dreams of the Russian army in Ukraine were soon dashed. The Russian army faced unexpected resistance in Ukraine. The Russian invaders are about to lose many of the territories they won at the very beginning of the war. Ukrainian fighters blockaded the Russian army along the entire battle line. The Russian army is trapped in Ukraine. The successful attacks of the Ukrainian heroic soldiers on the Russian fronts caused incurable wounds in the Russian army. Russia has lost at least 80,000 soldiers in Ukraine since the beginning of the invasion. Russian casualties in Ukraine were not limited to military personnel. The Russian army, in the defeat of the Ukrainian warriors, consumed almost all of its weapons stocks. Russia is struggling to supply weapons to its dying army in Ukraine. The vast majority of the attacks carried out by the Ukrainian army for months involve logistics routes to the Russian front. Russia faced great difficulties due to the damage of many of its logistics networks in Ukraine. Russian soldiers have been unable to meet their needs such as food and shelter, which are necessary for their survival in Ukraine in recent days. Russia's hands are tied in Ukraine. The sanctions imposed on Russia are another factor affecting the aid to be sent to the Russian front. Through sanctions and aid provided to the Ukrainian military, Ukraine's allies are teaching Russia an unforgettable lesson. The Ukrainian army, on the other hand, continues to intensify its attacks day by day, taking advantage of the weakening of the Russian army, and it's coming to the brink of collapse. Ukraine's Kherson acquisition is extremely important in reaching other important cities of the region. The Ukrainian army announced Crimea as its next target. Winning Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, is Zelensky's biggest dream. The Ukrainian army continues its attacks without interruption to clear the Crimea from Russian invaders, which is Zelensky's and the Ukrainians' big dream. The attack of the Ukrainian army on Sevastopol caused great disappointment in Russia. With its flawless plan, the Ukrainian army bombed the Russian Navy's port in Sevastopol, Crimea, with 7 submarine drones and 9 UAVs. The main headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet was helpless. In the face of the Ukrainian drone army attack, Ukraine's drones easily penetrated the Russian defenses. Ukrainian underwater drones were the size of a canoe, racing through the waves, gliding towards their intended destination. It was reported that 3 warships belonging to the Russian Navy were damaged when the Ukrainian UAVs hit their targets. The most important of these was the Admiral Makarov, the flagship of the Russian Navy. Another ship and minesweeper were also hit. As a result of this attack, the damage was less than expected, the warheads barely scratching their victims. But the effects of the attack by Ukrainian UAVs on the Russian Navy in Sevastopol went far beyond the explosions. They put the Russian Navy into protection mode and essentially locked them in the port. The Ukrainian army's attack on Sevastopol had a dramatic effect on the morale and sense of security of the Russian Navy, which Putin trusted so much. Russia quickly added new defenses to the Russian Navy, and new procedures were introduced. Russia's most powerful warships in the war are now mostly moored in port. Ukraine's Sevastopol attack, which caused an earthquake in Russia, took its place in the dusty pages of history. It wasn't the first time the Ukrainian military had used explosive-laden USVs to attack ships in combat, but it is the clearest and cleanest example to date. And the naval drones included are closer to modern technologies. These drones used modern communication systems, probably Starlink, and collective tactics. The number and degree of coordination involved were below swarm tactics, but halfway through, so it could be a preview of the upcoming battles. The drones used by the Ukrainian military in the attack are small and relatively inexpensive. Despite using the latest technology, they were the kind of thing that could be installed in almost any garage. Drones stand out in terms of ease of use. Ready-to-use civilian components such as jet skis can be used in drone attacks. This feature of drones means that the risk of use is very low. The Ukrainian offensive involved almost zero military risk. The Russian military is now aware of the threat, but they remain a threat to the Russians and can be easily reused. Defense analysts have predicted swarm attacks for years, and Western navies are arming and training to better defend against imminent surface threats. If the same drones had attacked the US Navy or the Royal Navy, we can speculate that they would have done much worse, but that doesn't make them easy targets or a threat to ignore. Western navies have invested heavily in these threats precisely because they're dangerous for expensive warships, but so far it has been largely theoretical. World Naval Forces Ukraine's resounding Sevastopol attack in the sea gave a lesson to the World Naval Forces about the importance of UAVs. Until now, it has completely overlooked the use of USVs for attack, which has taken its place in the navies of many countries. A survey of any leading navy's USV programs shows many advanced and relevant designs, but they focus on unarmed missions such as intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or mine countermeasures. Some of the USVs are armed, but mostly used for a defensive role. In fact, a warhead could be placed on a small USV and crash into an enemy warship. However, for political reasons and possibly lack of imagination in some quarters, the navies were not able to make these improvements to these USVs. Ukraine's attack on Sevastopol changed everything. Individually, these USVs will remain a relatively low threat to a well-trained and equipped navy, especially as the element of surprise wears off. But they can be a regular threat in any future war and become a part of the structure that cannot be ignored. Such armed USVs should not be the protectors of smaller navies, hoping to deliver an asymmetrical response to a larger enemy. They should also be in the arsenals of major navies. At the same time, it must be admitted that some of their advantages lie in their cheapness. Time will tell how quickly the USV market will adapt to the new role, but analysts and navies will be looking at such scenarios for years to come. The sinking of the Russian cruiser Moskva by the attack of Ukrainian warriors is one of the greatest naval victories of decades and will deserve its place in history. But the Ukrainian army's drone attack on Sevastopol could be seen as a bigger deal in the long run. The unexpected attack of the Ukrainian army on Sevastopol had a dramatic effect on the Russian navy. Few would have guessed that the attack by the Ukrainian army, 9 months after the invasion of the world-renowned Russian navy, was the port of the once mighty Russian Black Sea Fleet. This is the result of a series of Ukrainian naval victories and increased capabilities. Among the most important victories of the attacks by the Ukrainian army are the sinking of the Moscow cruiser, the recapture of Snake Island, and the arrival of the Harpoon missiles. The supremacy of the Ukrainian army at sea is a minor local innovation that will be remembered as a turning point in maritime history among all developments. Zelensky's army began to pay off for its struggle against Russian troops in the south of Ukraine. The Ukrainian forces continued their shelling of Kherson, which is the pearl of the country, for months, and the news from the Russian army in the past days shocked everyone. Russia announced that it was withdrawing its troops from Kherson. The withdrawal statement from Russia was met with joy and enthusiasm in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces entered the city with large convoys of vehicles just after the Russian troops left Kherson. Ukrainian President Zelensky paid a visit to the city after Kherson was cleared of Russian invaders. The inhabitants of Kherson celebrated the arrival of Zelensky in a festive mood. At Zelensky's parade in the streets of Kherson, residents greeted him with cheers and showed their full support for his struggle against the Russian invaders. The Ukrainian army continues to lead the world's most powerful armies. Ukraine's struggle against the Russian army teaches many world giants a lesson. Thank you for watching us.